Queen Erinda stood at the balcony of her grand palace, her eyes fixed on the horizon. The planet below, once full of life and joy, now seemed quiet, almost hollow. The war had taken so much from her people, her soldiers, and her beloved son, Prince Kael. The news of his death had shattered her heart, and yet she still couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. How could a battle take him so suddenly? How could the enemy have been so merciless? Her heart could not accept it. Not fully. She stared down at the memorial garden, where the names of those who fell in battle were carved into stone. Prince Kael's name stood there, among the others. The queen had ordered it, the day they declared him lost, but in the deepest part of her heart, she refused to believe it. The grief was overwhelming, yet it was the only truth she had left to hold on to. "Your Majesty," came a voice behind her, soft, yet respectful. Queen Erinda turned to see her most trusted advisor, General Thrawn, standing at the door. He had been with her since the beginning of her reign. His face, though worn with age and worry, was always calm, as if nothing could shake him. But today, even his calm demeanor couldn't hide the concern in his eyes. "I have news from the front." "Lines, my queen," Thrawn said, stepping forward. His voice was steady, but Erinda could see the tension in his shoulders. "What news?" she asked, her tone sharp, yet weary. "Reports have come in. The humans, they are making progress in rebuilding the war-torn regions. There's also talk of a special team sent out to search for survivors from the last battle." Erinda raised an eyebrow. "Survivors? What are you suggesting, General?" Thrawn hesitated. "A human soldier has reported strange activity near the ruins of the last battlefield. He believes there's a possibility that Prince Kael might still be alive." The queen's heart skipped a beat. Her mind raced, and for a moment she almost couldn't breathe. Could it be possible? Could her son have survived? She had to. No. She couldn't let this possibility slip away without a chance to learn the truth. "Send word to him," she said, her voice trembling for the first time. "I want to meet this soldier." The palace was quiet as the sun set. Erinda could feel the weight of the years she had spent leading her people on her shoulders. She had fought battles, faced betrayals, and seen the destruction of everything she once held dear. And yet, none of that compared to the sorrow she felt over the loss of Kael. The doors to her chambers opened, and Thrawn returned, leading a tall human man into the room. His face was scarred, his uniform dirtied from travel. His eyes were tired but determined. "Your Majesty," the soldier said, bowing his head in respect. "I'm Michael Stroud, part of the peacekeeping force stationed here." "Speak, soldier," Erinda said, trying to mask the desperation in her voice. "What have you found?" Michael straightened. "I've traveled through the remnants of the battlefield," he began. "There's an underground facility, one that wasn't detected by our scanners. Inside, we found signs of life. Not just any life, but Prince Kael. He's alive." Erinda's breath caught in her throat. She stepped forward, her heart racing. "My son, alive?" Michael nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty. He's alive but badly injured. We've kept him in stasis until we could bring him to you." The queen felt her knees weaken, but she held herself up. "Where is he now?" Michael motioned to the door. "He's being transported to your medical chamber. We need your expertise to help him recover." Erinda's hands trembled as she took a deep breath. Her son, alive. The joy and pain of it swirled inside her. She had spent so many months mourning him, but now she was filled with a hope she hadn't felt in years. "Take me to him," she said, her voice steady now, her resolve returning. As they walked through the palace corridors, Erinda couldn't help but glance at the soldier beside her. Michael Stroud, a human. He had brought her son back. She owed him more than words could express, but she had to know. Why had he risked everything to find Kale? What drove him to help an alien queen, especially after all that had happened between their species? They reached the medical chamber where Prince Kale lay, unconscious but alive. The machines around him beeped steadily, and the faint rise and fall of his chest was the only sign of life. Irinda stepped forward, her heart swelling with a mixture of love and sorrow. She reached out and touched his hand gently. The prince's skin was cold, his body frail, but he was alive. Her son was alive. "Thank you," Irinda whispered to the soldier standing beside her. "Thank you for bringing him back." Michael bowed his head. "It was my honor, Your Majesty." Irinda turned to him, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Why did you do it, human? Why risk your life for my son, for someone you barely know?" Michael hesitated, his eyes flickering toward the prince. "Because I believe in the future, Your Majesty. The war is over, and I wanted to help rebuild what we lost. Not just for us, but for everyone." Queen Irinda studied him for a long moment. She saw no deceit in his eyes, only truth and a sense of duty. He wasn't like the others. He didn't come here for glory or power. He came because he believed in something greater. "Perhaps we will have much to discuss in the coming days," Irinda said. "But for now, my son is alive, and that is all that matters." Michael nodded. "Of course, Your Majesty. I'll be here if you need anything." As the queen sat by her son's side, watching over him, a small spark of hope began to flicker inside her. This unexpected gift, this miracle, had been brought by an unlikely ally. And maybe, just maybe, it was the first step toward healing the wounds of war. The palace halls were quiet as Queen Irinda walked alongside Michael, her thoughts a whirlwind of emotions. Her son was alive. After all this time, after believing him lost forever, he had returned. She couldn't fully comprehend it yet, but every step she took toward the medical chamber only strengthened the overwhelming truth. Prince Kyle was here, and he was alive. Michael, the human soldier, walked beside her. He had been instrumental in bringing her son back, but the queen still didn't fully understand why he had risked so much. They had been enemies in the war. Why would a human put his life on the line for an alien prince, let alone a queen? Her mind wandered back to the battlefield. The news of Kale's death had been a crushing blow. The alien forces had lost many that day, and Irinda had vowed to lead her people into a new era of peace. But peace had been elusive, and she could never truly heal from the loss of her son. They entered the medical chamber, and Irinda's eyes immediately fell upon Kale. He was lying on the bed, his body covered in medical wraps. Machines beeped softly around him, their steady rhythm the only sound in the room. His face, though pale and bruised, still held the unmistakable features of the boy she had raised. Her heart ached as she gently touched his hand, her fingers brushing against the cold skin. "He's alive," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. Michael stood at the doorway, giving the queen a moment of privacy. He could see how much this moment meant to her, and he respected the queen's need for space. But he also knew that the truth would soon need to be shared. There were things he had learned during his journey that couldn't be kept hidden forever. After a moment, Irinda looked up at Michael, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." Michael nodded, stepping closer to the bed. "It wasn't easy," he said, "but we didn't give up. We never gave up." Irinda's gaze never left her son. "How did you find him?" she asked, her voice filled with curiosity and a hint of disbelief. "How did you know he was still alive?" Michael hesitated, glancing at the machines around them. We followed the trail left behind from the battle. There were signs that someone had hidden survivors, Prince Kale among them. The underground facility we found was a place where wounded soldiers were taken. The facility was hidden deep within the mountains, away from the prying eyes of our scanners. "And you found him there?" Erinda asked, her voice shaking. "Yes," Michael replied. "He was weak, injured, but he was alive. We knew we had to bring him back." Erinda stepped back from her son's bedside and turned to face Michael. "I don't understand. Why would you, human soldiers, go so far to bring him back?" Michael met her gaze without hesitation. "Because we believed it was the right thing to do. After everything we've been through, we needed to rebuild. Not just our world, but this one too. We need peace, Your Majesty. The kind of peace that comes from helping one another." Erinda looked at him, her expression unreadable. "So you're telling me that after all the suffering and destruction, you still believe in peace?" She paused, her voice softening. "Why?" Michael stepped closer, his eyes locked with hers. "I'm not saying it's easy, but if we don't try, then all the lives we lost will have meant nothing. It's the least we can do, to make sure they didn't die in vain. That's why I brought Kale back. I didn't do it for glory or to prove something. I did it because it was the right thing." Erinda stared at him for a long moment. She had always believed in the strength of her people, but hearing the sincerity in Michael's voice made her pause. Could it be possible that the humans, once their enemies, could truly want peace? Could they be allies? For the first time in a long while, Erinda allowed herself to hope. But the road ahead would not be easy. There would be others, like her, advisors who would not trust the humans. After all, they were once enemies. Trust would need to be earned, and it would take time. But Michael had taken the first step. "Your actions have earned my respect," Erinda said finally, her voice steady. "But trust is something that will take time." "I understand," Michael replied. "I'm not asking for instant trust, but if you'll allow me, I'd like to help you rebuild. Not just with Kale's return, but with the peace we both need." Erinda nodded slowly. "We will see. I will need time to process all of this." Michael gave her a respectful bow. "Of course, Your Majesty." As Michael stepped away, Erinda returned to her son's side. She gently stroked Kale's hair, her heart swelling with love. Her son was alive. She could hardly believe it. And yet she knew that his survival was more than just a miracle. It was a symbol of something greater, something she was just beginning to understand. The road to peace would be long, but perhaps, with the help of unexpected allies like Michael, they could begin to heal the wounds of the past. Together, humans and aliens could build a future where war and hatred were no longer the answer. The days following Kale's return were filled with a strange mixture of joy and tension. Queen Erinda spent most of her time by her son's side, watching over him as he slowly regained his strength. Her people celebrated the prince's survival, but Erinda knew that there was still much to be done. She couldn't let her guard down. Not yet. Michael Stroud, the human soldier who had brought Kale back, remained at the palace, assisting with anything that was needed. Though the queen had not yet fully embraced the idea of human involvement in her kingdom's affairs, she couldn't deny that Michael had proven himself valuable. Still, the question lingered in her mind. Why had he done it? What had driven him to risk everything for someone he had never known? On the 5th day after Kale's return, Michael approached the queen's chambers, ready to offer his help once more. His uniform was clean and his face was calm, but Erinda could see the exhaustion in his eyes. The journey had taken its toll on him. He wasn't a young man, but there was something in the way he carried himself, determined and unyielding, that made him stand out among others. Erinda stood at the balcony, gazing out over her city. The sky was a soft blue, the sunlight filtering through the clouds, but there was an air of uncertainty. She had seen peace slip through her fingers too many times in the past. Could this time be different? Your Majesty, Michael's voice broke through her thoughts. She turned to face him, giving him a brief nod. I'm glad you came, she said, her voice calm but filled with the weight of responsibility. How is Kyle? Michael stepped closer. He's getting stronger. His recovery is slow, but he's awake and aware. He asked about you. Irinda's heart warmed at the thought of her son waking up. She had not left his side for long, but hearing that he was asking for her filled her with both relief and a new sense of urgency. I'll go to him soon, she said, but there are more pressing matters I must attend to. The people need reassurance, and I must address them. Michael nodded, understanding the Queen's duty to her people. I'll be here if you need me, Your Majesty. She paused, studying him. You have been a great help, Michael Stroud. You risked everything to bring my son back, but I still don't fully understand why. Michael looked at her, his expression earnest. It's not just about Kale. It's about all of us. We've been enemies for so long, Your Majesty, but I believe that we can move beyond that. I believe that humans and your people, our people, can work together to rebuild. If we don't, then all the loss we've suffered will have been for nothing. The sincerity in his words struck her. She had heard similar things from others before, but something in Michael's voice made her think that he truly meant it. Perhaps after all they had lost, there was a chance for peace. It wasn't easy to trust after so many years of war, but Michael's actions had shown her that trust was not something that came easily, but was something worth fighting for. I've heard your words, soldier, she said, her voice steady but filled with an undertone of uncertainty. But it will take time for my people to accept humans among us, let alone trust them. I understand, Michael said with a nod. Trust is earned, not given, but I will do what I can to help. Irinda sighed, turning back to the view. There is so much to rebuild. My people are frightened. They've lost so much. My son's return will be a symbol of hope, but they will need more than just hope. They will need action. Michael stepped forward, offering his support once more. What do you need, Your Majesty? Whatever it is, I'll help. I have no army, no soldiers, just my word. But I will do everything in my power to assist. Irinda turned to him, meeting his gaze directly. I'll need you to gather your people, Michael. I need the human forces to work with us to restore what was destroyed. We cannot do this alone. Michael's eyes flickered with something new, hope. It was the first time Irinda had seen him so certain of their future. I'll make sure it happens. I'll speak to my commanders. I'll make this happen. Irinda studied him for a long moment, weighing the trust she had already given him. She wasn't sure if this was the right decision, but for the first time in years, she felt as though there was a chance for a future built on cooperation, rather than war. Then we begin, she said. But it must be done carefully. There will be many who will resist. You must be prepared for that. I'll be ready, Michael said, his voice steady. The next few days were filled with intense planning and communication. Michael reached out to his fellow soldiers, while Irinda met with her advisors. The task ahead of them was immense, rebuilding the damaged cities, securing the borders, and ensuring that all factions within her kingdom felt heard and supported. But even with all the work, there was one thing that remained constant in Irinda's mind: the need to gain her people's trust. Her son, Kale, was still recovering. But every time Irinda visited him, she could see the strength returning to his eyes. His presence was a beacon of hope for the people, and it was clear that he would lead them into a new era, one of peace, not war. As the days passed, the city began to come alive once more. Humans and aliens worked side by side, fixing broken infrastructure, gathering resources, and restoring order. There were difficulties, of course, and arguments between the two species, but there was also something new: cooperation. It was a small step, but it was the first step toward something much larger, a lasting peace between two worlds that had once been enemies. The days following the first steps toward cooperation were filled with challenges, but also unexpected moments of unity. Queen Orinda stood at the edge of her palace once more, looking out over the city. The air was warmer now, the tension that had hung over the land slowly beginning to lift. It had only been a few weeks since Michael Stroud, the human soldier, had returned her son to her, and since then, much had changed. But there was still so much more to do. Michael had kept his word. He had spoken to his commanders, and humans and aliens alike were working together to rebuild the kingdom. There were still factions within both sides that questioned this newfound alliance, but for the most part the efforts were successful. The streets, once empty and silent from the war, were now alive with activity. People worked together to repair buildings, restore resources, and reclaim the lands lost in the conflict. The most important task, however, was bringing the people together. Trust, the Queen knew, would take time. And that was something she had very little of. "Your Majesty," Michael's voice interrupted her thoughts. She turned to see him walking toward her, his expression serious but hopeful. "I've just met with the leaders of the human forces. They're ready to send more help. We've made progress." Orinda nodded, her gaze returning to the city. "Good, but it's not enough. We need more than just help with rebuilding. We need to heal the divisions between our people. The wounds run deep." Michael stepped closer, his eyes softening. "I know. It's going to take time, but we're on the right path. Together, we can make it happen." The Queen turned to him, her expression a mixture of gratitude and concern. "And what about your people? Will they continue to support this alliance? There are those among them who still see us as enemies." Michael paused, considering her question. "There will always be people who resist. But I believe that peace is worth fighting for. The soldiers I've spoken to, they want peace too. They want something better than endless fighting." Orinda could see the determination in his eyes, and for a moment, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a new future. But there was still one obstacle that neither she nor Michael had fully addressed: the resistance within her own kingdom. Orinda's advisors, the nobles, and even some of her own generals all had doubts about the human alliance. They feared it would weaken their power, and they feared what the future might hold if they accepted humans as equals. "I've received reports from my council," Orinda said quietly. "Many of my people are still suspicious. They do not trust the humans. They do not understand why I would allow such an alliance." Michael nodded. "It's understandable. Change is never easy. But the human soldiers who are here, those who risked their lives for your son, are not the same as those who fought against you. We're all here for one thing: peace." Orinda sighed, her gaze drifting back to the horizon. "It's not just the humans. There are factions among my people who are loyal to the old ways, who think that peace is a weakness. They believe in power and war, not in cooperation." Michael looked at her with a quiet understanding. "I can't speak for your people, Your Majesty, but I do know this: the world is changing, and we can either fight it, or we can be part of that change." Orinda's mind wandered to the future. She thought about her son, Kyle, who was still recovering, but whose presence was already a symbol of hope for the people. If they could see him, if they could understand that his return was proof of the possibility of peace, then maybe they would begin to change their minds. "I will address my people," she said at last. "I will tell them that peace is not a weakness. It is our strength, and I will ask them to give it a chance." Michael smiled, relief washing over him. "That's all we can do, Your Majesty. Take the first step. The rest will follow." Later that day, Erinda stood before the crowd in the palace courtyard. Her people had gathered, their faces uncertain, their eyes filled with questions. They had seen the destruction of war. They had felt the pain of loss. And now, they were faced with the challenge of accepting something new, something they did not fully understand. Erinda's heart pounded in her chest, but she stood tall, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. She had never felt more vulnerable, but she knew that this was the moment that would define the future of her kingdom. "My people," she began, her voice strong, yet filled with emotion. "For years, we fought. We fought for survival. We fought for power. We fought to protect what was ours. But we have lost much in that fight, more than we ever expected. My son, Prince Kale, was lost to us in that fight. And yet, against all odds, he has returned. But he has not returned to lead us into another war. He has returned to lead us into peace." There was a murmur in the crowd, and Erinda could feel the weight of their eyes on her. "Peace is not easy," she continued. "It is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of strength. Strength to put aside our differences, to build something better, something greater for all of us. I ask you to join me in this new path, one where we work together, not just as a kingdom, but as a united people. Together with those who were once our enemies, we can build a future that honors the sacrifices of the past." She paused, letting her words sink in. She could see the hesitation in the faces of some, but also a glimmer of hope in others. Hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for something better. "I ask you to trust me," she said softly. "Trust that peace is worth the effort. Trust that we are stronger together." As Erinda finished her speech, she could hear the whispers in the crowd, the murmurs of doubt, but also the words of agreement. Some were still unsure, but there were others who were willing to take the first step. Michael, standing near the back, gave her a nod of approval. The path ahead was not easy, but it had begun. And for the first time in a long while, Erinda allowed herself to believe that perhaps this new alliance could work. The work to rebuild the kingdom had begun in earnest, and though Queen Erinda still faced resistance, there was a noticeable shift. The humans had proven themselves in their partnership, and her people were slowly beginning to see the value in cooperation. Yet, even as they worked together to restore what had been lost, a dark shadow lingered on the horizon. Erinda stood on the balcony of the palace once more, gazing out at the city. The streets were alive with activity as human and alien workers rebuilt homes, farms, and businesses. It was a sight that filled her heart with hope, but her thoughts could not escape the looming threat of the Jorai. They were still out there, somewhere in the galaxy, watching and waiting. Their resentment toward the peace that had begun to grow between the two species was not something that could be easily overcome. "Your Majesty," came a voice behind her. Erinda turned to see General Thrawn, her trusted advisor and military leader, stepping forward with a worried expression. His face, though usually calm and composed, was now filled with concern. "What is it, General?" she asked, her voice steady, though she could already sense the trouble in his tone. Thrawn stepped closer, his gaze wary. "There have been reports from our outer colonies. The Jorai have been spotted in the area. They've been gathering forces. We don't know how large their army is, but they are preparing for something." Erinda's heart sank. She had known that this day would come. The Jorai had never been a people to accept peace, especially when it meant losing their power and control. They would not sit idly by while humanity and the aliens worked together to rebuild their world. But she had hoped that, for once, they would stay silent. "How long until they arrive?" Erinda asked, trying to keep the fear from her voice. "It's difficult to say," Thrawn replied. "But we must prepare. We cannot afford to be caught off guard again." Erinda nodded, her mind already racing. The last war had nearly destroyed everything. The thought of another battle was unbearable. Yet she knew that her people had no choice but to defend themselves. And if the Jorai were coming, they needed to act quickly. "I will speak to Michael," Erinda said, turning toward the door. "We need the humans' help. We cannot face the Jorai alone." A short time later, Michael Stroud stood in front of the Queen's chambers. He had heard the news, and he knew what was coming. The human forces had been working alongside the aliens to rebuild, but they had never been fully prepared for another war, and the Jorai would be a much greater threat than anything they had faced before. As he entered the room, Erinda was already waiting for him. Her expression was serious, her eyes filled with the weight of responsibility. "Michael," she said, her voice steady but filled with concern. "We have received reports that the Jorai are gathering forces. They are preparing for something. I need your help. We must defend our people." Michael didn't hesitate. "You have it, Your Majesty. We'll help however we can. The Jorai are a dangerous enemy, and we can't let them destroy what we've worked so hard to build." Erinda nodded, grateful for his unwavering support. "We will need to unite our forces. The humans and aliens must fight together, this time. There can be no division. If we do not stand as one, the Jorai will destroy everything we've rebuilt." Michael's face hardened. "We've already lost so much. We can't afford to lose any more." "Then we will fight together," Erinda said firmly. "But we need to act quickly. The longer we wait, the stronger they become." Michael bowed his head slightly. "I'll speak to my commanders. We'll start preparing immediately." As the days passed, preparations for war began. Human and alien soldiers trained together, learning to fight side by side. The tension in the air was thick, but there was also a sense of unity. For the first time, the two species were not just working together. They were standing together, ready to defend their future. Erinda watched as her people and the humans came, together in ways she had never thought possible. They shared knowledge, exchanged ideas, and prepared for the battle ahead. The Jorai might have been powerful, but they were not invincible. And together, the humans and aliens had something the Jorai could never have: unity. Michael Stroud was everywhere, coordinating the human forces and ensuring that they were ready. He worked tirelessly alongside General Thran to organize the defense of the kingdom. Erinda watched him, impressed by his dedication. The human soldier had become more than just an ally. He had become a leader in his own right. One night, as they stood together in the war room, Michael turned to Erinda. "Your Majesty, we've done all we can. Our forces are ready. Now, we just wait for the Jorai to make their move." Erinda's eyes were steady. "We will not let them destroy everything we've worked for, Michael. This time we will not lose." Michael nodded, his face set with determination. "We fight for our future, for the future of all our people." The Queen looked out the window, her gaze piercing the darkness. She knew the battle ahead would be fierce, but this time, she was not alone. This time, the humans and aliens would fight side by side, and together, they would win. The day the Jorai finally arrived, the sky above the kingdom was dark with the threat of war. The Jorai forces landed just outside the city's borders, their ships hovering ominously in the sky. But the human and alien forces stood ready. Erinda stood at the front lines, her heart steady, her mind focused. She had faced many battles in her life, but this one felt different. It wasn't just her people she was fighting for. It was the future they had fought so hard to create, and she would not let the Jorai take that from them. "Ready yourselves," Erinda called out to her people. "Today, we fight not for power, but for peace. We fight for the future of all our children." The soldiers around her raised their weapons, ready for the fight ahead. Michael stood beside her, his face grim but determined. "Together," he said, his voice strong. "We will win." And with that, the battle began. The days after Erinda's speech were filled with a mix of hope and uncertainty. Queen Erinda knew that the real work had just begun. The resistance was still present among some factions of her people, but there was a shift in the air. The possibility of peace, of cooperation between humans and aliens, was something that could no longer be ignored. The human forces had done more than just assist with rebuilding. They had become a symbol of change. The Queen had witnessed firsthand how the soldiers worked side by side with her people, not as conquerors, but as partners. They shared knowledge, skills, and even traditions that had once been seen as foreign. Slowly, trust was beginning to form. Erinda stood at the edge of her palace balcony once more, watching the city below. The work was ongoing. The streets were no longer silent, but alive with movement. The wounded had been healed, the homes rebuilt, and the scars of war were being covered by the green of new growth. It was a long process, but it was a start. Michael Stroud had remained at the palace, offering his assistance whenever needed. He had spoken to his commanders, and more soldiers had arrived, ready to help with the continued efforts to restore the kingdom. The cooperation between their people had started to take root, though it was clear that it would take time for the full fruits of their labor to be realized. "Your Majesty," Michael's voice broke through her thoughts. She turned to find him approaching, his expression filled with determination. "The human forces are prepared to offer more aid. They are willing to stay as long as needed." Erinda nodded, her gaze still fixed on the horizon. "It's good to know that they are willing, but there are still many who are unsure." Michael stepped closer, his voice gentle but firm. "We can't expect everyone to change overnight, Your Majesty. It will take time, but we're on the right path. Every day, more and more people are seeing the value in working together." Erinda smiled faintly, her heart heavy with the weight of her responsibilities. "I hope you're right, Michael. I truly do." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared mission settling between them. Erinda had learned to trust Michael in ways she hadn't thought possible. He had proven himself to be more than just a soldier. He had become a symbol of the change she needed, a bridge between two worlds that had once been at war. "I've been thinking," Erinda said after a while, her voice thoughtful. "We need to show the people that this alliance is not just about survival. It's about a future where we stand together, not as enemies, but as partners." Michael looked at her, understanding what she meant. "You want to show them that peace is possible, not just in words but in actions." "Exactly," she replied. "The people need to see what we can achieve when we work together. We can't just rebuild the city, Michael. We need to rebuild trust. We need to show them that humans and aliens can coexist, that we can make each other stronger." Michael nodded. "I'll speak to my commanders. We can organize joint efforts, human and alien teams working together to create new technology, help with farming, improve education. There's so much we can do." Erinda's eyes sparkled with hope. "That's a start. It's time to show them what we can accomplish together." The following weeks were filled with collaboration and progress. Joint teams of humans and aliens worked side by side, not just in rebuilding cities, but in reshaping the future. New technologies were introduced, improving healthcare and farming techniques. The two species shared knowledge and learned from each other. The once fractured city began to take on a new life, and the Queen saw her people start to believe in the future they were creating. It wasn't easy. There were still those who resisted, but they were fewer and farther between. As the Queen had hoped, the more her people saw the benefits of the alliance, the more they began to accept it. Michael's leadership among the human soldiers was evident. He had proven to be a strong ally to Erinda, and his presence gave her the confidence she needed to continue down this path. Together, they had formed something greater than either of their people could have imagined alone. Their actions spoke louder than any words ever could. One afternoon, as Arinda and Michael stood together on the palace balcony once more, watching the progress below, she felt a sense of peace that had eluded her for so long. The war was behind them, and a new era was unfolding before her eyes. "Do you think they believe in it now?" Michael asked, glancing at her. Arinda smiled, her eyes scanning the bustling city below. "I think they're beginning to." Michael's smile mirrored hers. "It's a start." "It's more than that," Arinda said softly. "It's the beginning of something new, a future that our children will be able to grow up in, free from the fear of war. That's what we're building together." They stood there in silence for a while, both of them knowing that their work was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, and there would be times when the path would seem uncertain. But they were no longer facing it alone. Together, they had built a foundation of hope, one that would continue to grow with time. And as the sun set on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange, Arinda knew that they had truly begun to shape a new future, one of unity, peace, and strength.